When the topic of mecha anime comes up, the average person will probably think of Gundam. Reasonably so. Gundam pioneered the real robot genre, and is currently one of the top-earning media franchises not just in Japan, but in the entire world. While Gundam dominates the real robot subgenre, Mazinger is the staple of super robots. Mazinger isn't as popular in the US as Gundam, although it was dubbed twice, once as Transor Z. However, it does have a significant presence outside of Japan and other parts of Asia, as well as Europe and Latin America. Guillermo del Toro cited Mazinger as an inspiration for the blockbuster Pacific Rim. Every game in the popular crossover series Super Robot Wars, aside from the OGs, has some representation from Mazinger and also Gundam. The original Mazinger manga was created by Go Nagai, the man behind works such as Devilman and Cutie Honey. And while it wasn't the first Super Robot series or even anime, that credit belongs to Tetsujin 28, Mazinger was the origin of piloted mecha, and thus the entire genre that followed. And now that I've spent all this time explaining Mazinger to you, I will now proceed to not talk about Mazinger, but rather this one spin-off OVA that is only loosely based on another spin-off, Mazinkaiser SKL, spelled SKL. The spin-off Skull is based on is Mazinkaiser, which is an upgraded Mazinger that debuted in Super Robot Wars and eventually got its own OVA series. The original Mazinkaiser OVA still stars Koji Kabuto as the main pilot and is a sequel of sorts to the original Mazinger. Mazinkaiser SKL, on the other hand, is completely removed from the Mazinger lore and only really carries over some of the mechanical and character design elements into it, as well as some cameos. Mazinkaiser SKL takes place on an island ruled by 3 warring factions. First is the Kiba Army, a barbaric group that pilot machines that resemble some of Mazinger's classic mechanical beast enemies, Doubles M2 and Garada K7. Second is the feudal Japan-themed Garan Army, who pilot the more humanoid robots, which are based on another classic enemy, Kingdan X10. The final faction is the Hachi Ryokaku, a group of all women that use their psychic abilities, and robots themed after Aphrodite Ace. The warring factions have all created their vast armies through use of the gravity engine in the center of the island, but due to its overuse, it is in danger of exploding and taking out the entire world with it. This is where our heroes, the Skull Force, come in. The Skull Force is made up of 2 squadrons, the first of which is all but wiped out when their dropship is shot down upon entry into the island's barrier. The sole survivor, Yuki, voiced by Hayami Saori, crash lands onto the island and is saved by the other squad, which consists only of the 2-man team Kaido Ken, codename Amon 6, and Magami Ryo, codename Lucifer 4. They are our dual protagonists and co-pilots of the titular Mazinkaiser. Also, a bit of a funny coincidence, or maybe it was intentional, I don't know, that Ken and Ryo's seiyus, Asanuma Shintaro and Hino Satoshi, would also play the 2 Devilman protagonists, Akira and Ryo, in Cyborg 009 vs. Devilman. Ken is a reckless and hot-blooded close combat fighter, and Ryo is the more cool-headed firearms expert. Well, I say cool-headed, but Ryo is certainly no saint. He and Ken both believe that they only truly feel alive when they are fighting. Their catchphrase is "We are hell," which is just, so good. Could absolutely cut yourself on the edge. The duo share the cockpit of Kaiser and switch control to make use of their specific combat skills with the Kaiser's multitude of weapons. Ken's main weapon is the gigantic Ganzanto sword, while Ryo makes use of the breast triggers, guns that are stored usually in the Kaiser's chestplate. The Mazinkaiser mech itself has been rehauled since the original OVA, adding even more sharp points and bone motifs to everything, including the entire Pilder aircraft, which has been remodeled to be a skull that sits on the top of Kaiser's head. There's also some new flavors for the Mazinger's classic special attacks. Skull's Rust Hurricane is the Rust Stream, and its Rocket Punch is the Tornado Crusher. Great Mazinger's Thunder Break is Skull's Thor Hammer Breaker. And of course, The Breast Fire is now the Inferno Blaster. While the boys are having their fun turning enemies into mechanical tomato soup, Yuki is saved by the Hachiryokaku and meets their leader Aira, who exposits about the state of the island and the gravity engine. Yuki starts to put together a plan to stop the gravity engine and retrieves Wingle, a mecha that bears a striking resemblance to Minerva X from Mazinger, and also Sirene from Devilman. Wingle, as you may have guessed from the name, has wings that can detach and combine with the Kaiser, similar to the classic Mazinger Scrander. I could explain more about how the plot proceeds, but really, it doesn't matter. The story and writing are not at all why you should watch Mazinkaiser SKL. The real joy of SKL is watching Ken and Ryo shred through their enemies in some extreme displays of robotic gore. There is only one low point in the 3 episodes of the OVA, and that's at the end of the 2nd episode where Ryo has some angst and gets the Kaiser thrashed for a bit. It leaves a cool scar on the Kaiser, and they get over it pretty quick. Mazinkaiser SKL is needlessly edgy and almost completely nonsensical, and that's why it rules. Usually I would say there's a fine line on the edgy anime scale between using dark themes to strengthen the narrative and just using it for shock value. But Mazinkaiser SKL throws all of that out the door and says fuck logic, wouldn't it be cool if we... and then proceeds to just present the viewer with some badass shit. It's absolutely the kind of anime that you turn on so you don't have to think for an hour and just enjoy the madness. It's not as truly graphic as the 80s Devilman or the more recent Devilman Crybaby, but that also makes it a bit more accessible to a general audience. You don't really have to think about the violence in SKL. Watch Mazinkaiser SKL, it's an absolute treat, and it's a fairly brief watch too. It's the perfect thing to put on for an anime watch party with friends. I think the best way to sum SKL up is with a line from the show itself. We fight because we want to fight, we smash because we want to smash, we don't have any just cause. You know what would be a just cause though? Subscribing to the channel. We're a bit more than halfway to 1,000 subscribers at this point, and I'm really excited to see where we can go from there. I am also starting a Patreon so people can actually support me directly. Patrons will get their name in the credits and maybe some exclusive content down the line. I'd really appreciate any kind of support, whether that's just here on YouTube or on Patreon. So thank you for watching all the way to the end and hearing me out, and I'll see ya in the next one.